That's right. You can't afford to buy
Cannot
anything.
afford to buy.
Who bought Maytag? Go back to Whirlpool.
Yes.
An heir of Whirlpool is a congressman.
Yes. In Mr. Upton.
That's
in
correct.
Western Michigan.
That is their congressman.
That's what I've brought that up numerous times.
So if you'd work with us with that footage on it,
Yeah, it's really, and it's how what they did. They were like I think the finance director, I believe it was, of Whirlpool, quit his job, went in there, and then dismantled the company. And so you look at how much money they walked away with. They even invented a product that was doomed to fail. They put a Maytag in a Suburban. They took a van and they put it in there, and nobody bought it. And so they wasted all this money, and that began the decline of the company. And that company was built from the bottom up by generations. In fact, Mr. Maytag is buried. Fred Maytag is buried looking at his plant. And it was the town, you know. But I thought it was symbolic of what happened to our country, which is why I went there. I thought every family had a Maytag, or they knew about Maytag, just like they know about GM, they know about Chrysler. And what happened to the auto companies is the auto companies became owned by the finance companies on Wall Street. So Cerberus owns both GM and Chrysler. They did not care about manufacturing. They cared about bleeding any equity out of those companies that they could. And during the 90s, it flowered where they became finance companies rather than manufacturing companies. They had all of these lease-back deals. They had fleet sales through tax credits, and they manipulated the hard-fought equity accumulation that people had worked on for 2 generations.
Correct.
And they achieved their goal. And they wrestled those companies to the ground. They bled them for everything. And when they got as much out of them as they could, spit out the workers, spit out the companies, they looked around and they found the last sector left that you could bleed. Well, there's only 2 left, housing and small business. They bled housing, and now they're after small business.
Marcy, what would you say to the American people? I think this film is necessary to the Americans to see their side. Do you agree? A documentary that tells what you've just told us.
I think a documentary is necessary because the American people have to fight back.
Yes, we do.
And a film is one way of doing it. And I can't tell you how many Americans have said to me, Marcy, we're giving up. We're going to move to Canada, we're going to move to France, we're going to move to Mexico. I said, America has given us the best years of our lives.
True.
Well,
she gave us sweet liberty. Or they won't talk, or they've withdrawn into their homes.
Or they won't vote. They say that voting doesn't make a difference.
That's right.
My dad, he's voted forever, his whole life, and he's saying it doesn't make a difference now.
It doesn't make a difference unless people fight back. And that's what the revolution was all about.
Yes,
we are a revolutionary people. And if the American people take back their country, and what they have to do is they have to wrestle down the forces that are strangling us. And those forces are very easy to find. They're the banks on Wall Street and in Charlotte, and all the subsidiaries that attach themselves to them that have done this to us. And they don't want to be in the spotlight. Those forces control our media, the messages that are fed over the media, and they want the people to be hopeless. They want the people, because if you're hopeless, you don't do anything, right?
Exactly.
And I say to the American people, you got to have a revolutionary spirit.
We do.
And you've got to love liberty as much as Daniel Webster loved liberty, as much as Thomas Paine loved liberty, as much as George Washington loved liberty. And you have to love sweet liberty, and you have to understand what it means, and that we have to bind together. And they want people to feel alone. They want them to feel hopeless, because then they control them.
Divide and conquer.
I have a question.
That's right.
If you could speak to like my generation, like the future,
Right.
The 20 and
Yes.
25-year-olds, about just what you just said, like hope. And a lot of people my age are concerned or scared about retirement or just our future in general, because the media bombards every day. If you watch the news, it's like the world's ending and there's no hope in sight. And younger people, I think, especially with the college loans, trying to find a place in the job market when the economy's so bad, we sit there and go, what's going to happen? you know?
I guess I would say to the young people of our generation, go back and read about the American Revolution. Go back and think about the people who said, we want to break the bonds that hold us down. We don't want to be dominated anymore by a colonial power that asks us to produce and then takes all of our wealth, right? And we want to be our own country. And we want to assume that power unto ourselves. And they formed a Declaration of Independence. And I would say to the young people of this country, you got the internet, you got so many more tools than our forefathers and mothers had. We need a Declaration of Independence for the modern era so that we can recapture our country and take it back and give it to the people who worked so hard to preserve our liberties and to carry them to the next generation. Unfortunately, what happened is that the corporate sector and including the banking sector of this country got too self-serving post-World War II. And when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, rather than using that peace dividend to strengthen the American people and strengthen our country, they captured more of it to themselves. And so, for example, right now, the young people of our country, I say to myself, why aren't they organizing marches on Wall Street? On Wall Street, they just took $143 billion in bonuses when our young people are being turned into debtors. The average student, $20,000 in debt, $50,000, $100,000. I just met two divinity students with $100,000 in debt.
Yep.
You are not free. They have the bondsmen have their hooks into you, and you have to say, hey, wait a minute. You have to think back to the founding principles and the founding energy of our country. And there needs to be a compact among our young people, the best and the brightest.
Yeah.
Liberty isn't an automatic. It has to be won anew by every generation. And you simply can't take this. You cannot be a tool of Wall Street, which they are making you. They are making you a sharecropper. They are making you a debtor. That is unfair to the future. Our liberties will not be preserved if the younger generation doesn't stand up and say, no. This is not the America we want.
I think one of the topics we want to touch on too is, and we've talked about, like you said, in the like the '60s and when activism was strong among America's youth. Like today with my generation, it's not the same thing, obviously. And I think that's a message we really want to portray and get out there to my generation, is that people need to there needs to be that the activism, especially with the youth, because in 20 years we are going to be. In 20 years we are going to be.
Well, I'll tell you, your generation has been raised in an era unlike mine, where hours and hours were spent passively watching video screens, televisions, talking on cell phones, individual to individual. You weren't taught how to organize groups of people in the common interest, for the common good. Magazines came out like Self magazine. People became inward. They withdrew. It's not that they're uneducated, but they've forgotten their political skills. They've forgotten how you move a great country forward. And that involves mobilization. There was never anything great that happened in this country when people didn't mobilize to make it happen. When the first credit union was established in Filene's basement in the city of Boston, people said, hey, wait a minute, we don't want to be charged these high interest rates. We're going to create our own financial institutions. And credit unions were created as a tool to fight back against control by very large banks. When labor unions organized in partnership with churches during the early part of the 20th century, America got Social Security. She got a 40-hour work week. She got time and a half overtime. She got no child labor. It was unbelievable what happened when people mobilized. frankly, when people mobilized, we became a republic. We threw off England, a colonial power, and now I see America in so many places in the world becoming a colonial power in places that don't even want us. I'm thinking in partnership with Great Britain. I thought, wait a minute, don't we remember our own history here? We wanted to be independent. So the young people, they've got all the instruments, but they've got to remember their political power. They've got to reassume their political power. They've got to mobilize. And frankly, if I were the young people, one of the first things I'd do is I'd go to Congress and I'd say, take the $143 billion back from Wall Street. They don't deserve it because they hurt the American people, and help us forgive our student loans from coast to coast. And do you realize how far that would go to freeing this generation from the bondage that they're in? I'd work with them on that. I'd march with them.
I would too.
I would too.
That's
I've
right.
got a friend that went to George Washington University. He graduates this year, $56,000 a year. He's going to graduate with $230,000 in college debt.
Oh,
My daughter, being a nurse, is $160,000. Or my granddaughter, $160,000 when she was
$56,000 a year. How are you going to pay that off? You better be a millionaire. I mean, in your lifetime, $250,000.
That's right, and you're trying to better yourself. You're trying. Young people are trying to. They're idealistic. They're motivated. They have the fire of youth. They, all this energy that can be put to good purpose, and yet they're burdened with this massive debt that's like a millstone around their neck, and they have to be freed from that. But they have to fight politically in order to get rid of it. And there are ways to get rid of it. I mean, they could come up with proposals to tax, put a fee on every lazy stock and bond transaction on Wall Street, a tiny little fee, 0.00001%. With the number of trades that happen in a day, they could raise a pool of money to relieve their own debt and to make Social Security whole for another century. But you have to mobilize. It just doesn't happen by accident. And through the internet, what young people are capable of, oh my goodness, they could really make a difference in this society. But it's like they're silent. I'm thinking, oh, have they forgotten what liberty is all about?
Maybe this will make it.
Liberty. And liberty means, the word liberty is different than freedom. Liberty means to be freed from. To be freed from something that holds you down. So the younger generation has to recapture the liberty for the country, for themselves, and for the nation. They have to free themselves and the nation from the bondage that is holding us down. And it's pretty clear who has the power.
But you see, with like this teabag movement, they seem to think it's all governments. The government's the boogeyman here, and it's not. With the progressives, they found that it's not the government. It's big business.
That's right, and in a way, that movement is purposefully being driven by funds and by mentors who want us to focus on the wrong thing. Because if you look at who won in the home mortgage foreclosure debate, it was Wall Street. It wasn't the ordinary person. It wasn't the person who'd been bilked out of their life savings. We have here in Toledo, we have groups that had worked for Citigroup, and their job was to promote widows' loans, where they would call women who'd lost their husbands and say, oh, we feel so sorry for you. We'd like to come and see you, and we have a solution to make sure you're financially solvent the rest of your life. And they treated him real nice, and then the widow would sign on the bottom line, and by golly, she signed one of those loans where after 5 years, her payment doubled. But she didn't know that. That's fraudulent. That's out-and-out fraud to do that to someone. And what kind of companies would do that? Citicorp in New York that just rewarded itself with more bonus money. We have to stand up to these individuals. But you can't do it one-on-one. You have to do it as a group. Peaceful demonstration